Hey, I'm Cecily Korst. Welcome to the trailer.
This is Cecily, editing from sunny New Orleans. The Trailer Talks is sponsored by Imaging DNA, Ideas, Images, Insight. The core of the conversation is the image at Imaging DNA. This week, we're bringing you the continued discussion with rock star Jeff Lynne, where he talks about moving from music to entrepreneurship. Enjoy!
You went from journalism into music and then into Microsoft, and now you've got a new venture.
Yeah. So after I kind of tied up my stuff at Microsoft, and now I went and co-founded a startup, a technology startup with a friend of mine, and it's called Captricity. This is actually something not very, very sexy, which is it digitizes. You have a stack of paper, forms, and what you really want, most people want, is like structured data in a database like an Excel spreadsheet or whatever. So, like you got like race times, and you really want those in like a database or something like that. That's the kind of thing that it does. And so, yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last I don't know, like almost 2 years at this point.
Wow.
And it's it's very, very similar to being in a band, like running a technology startup. It's the same type of personalities.
What was this last year's Pinch Me moment for you?
There are these events that are kind of like new startup launch conferences where you go and there's like typically like investors or technology press in attendance, and where you go and you demo your product. A bunch of startup companies go demo their product, and usually there's like a panel of judges, and they make a pronouncement and they give you feedback, and they're like, oh, this product is terrible, or you have forgotten this part, or what about this, or what about that. And so we actually pitched at this, we presented at this thing called Launch Conference in March, and we've been working on this for like a long time, and we kind of we had no idea what to expect, because it was one of our advisors said you should go participate. And it happened to be around when we were wanting to launch the public beta, and we presented, and we got near universal really positive feedback from everybody, and then suddenly we won the best technology prize, and we got most of the people that are judging panel came in as investors in the company later, and it was it was really, it was weird, because it was like when we were sitting in the audience and the judges were talking about which was companies that like best, they were always like, oh yeah, and Captricity this, and we were always the more they said it, the more it just became somewhat surreal in a way, but it was cool. It was cool.
What is success for you?
As long as I guess I keep learning and understanding things, I think that's success. Everything's kind of similar. You're making music, writing a novel, you're starting a company, you're doing computer programming, you're building a company, all these things, you're being a chef. They're all interrelated. And the older I get and the more I do this stuff, it's just it's all the same. It's remarkable how similar all the principles are. So
do you see that as a thread that has run through your career?
Looking backwards, it certainly seems like it. And maybe that's kind of what the narrative, if I have to write one, is that I just kind of go from weirdly unrelated things, but try and find what's very similar about them. I'm as curious as anybody to know what happens in the next 5 years of my life. 5 years ago, I would have never have imagined that I have a new perspective on what it means to work really hard on something, and it's all I have a much more long-term view of things now.
So what is the one thing that you think that other people living a creative life should know?
You can't know in advance, so don't try to plan it out. And then the only way to get things ever get done is the formula for you. Put your butt in the chair and do it. That's the only thing ever. There is no thing that I am aware of where you can shortcut any part of it. The brain doesn't work that way, and it's never worked that way. And even the people point at quote unquote geniuses, if you actually look at them, there's usually huge swaths of time where they've been working at it. It's just no one is paying attention. In a way, it's comforting to know there's, like, oh, well, it's Mozart or whatever, and I'm never going to be like Mozart because, I'm not that. And that's a cop-out. Like, it's a way of letting yourself off the hook to be like, well, I just wasn't meant for that, so nothing I can do. It's totally false. Like, you can pick up whatever you want to do, right? Like, if you really like it and, like, really want to do something, like, you can figure it out. The thing is, like, you just have to put the hours in. The bigger indicator is how much time have you actually worked on it. And that means, like, if you're going to be a musician, that you're writing music, that you're not, like, shopping for gear. If you're, a writer, you're sitting down writing, or at least sitting down with the intent to write. Like that's the most important thing.
It's the hard work.
It's just the work. It doesn't have to be hard. Hard is good, but the work. And it's, again, like, the long term, right? Work over time. And there's a reason for that, because your brain has to rewire itself, right? And it doesn't, you can't really speed it up. And then at the same time, as you get to rewiring yourself, you're also learning better how to evaluate it if you're paying attention.
I can't wait to see what you do next. It's going to be really exciting to watch you.
I will see. One of the things I will say, though, is that there are a lot of principles, like things in the creative arena that are really, really valuable, like for, like, making new things or understanding how to, like, create something that wasn't there before. But the kind of tragedy part is that a lot of, like, people that work in creative fields feel like all the, the disciplines that are more pedestrian, like business and stuff like that, there's kind of like an antagonistic relationship between that. And you saw it, I saw it definitely in journalism, mainstream journalism, and, where, like, well, I'm just a journalist. I don't know anything about the business side of things. Like, I don't want to be polluted with that. And then the same thing with, like, musicians, where, like, well, it's, label stuff. And it's like a cultural thing. Like, it just, like, it's not cool to be super commercial. And I totally get that. But the problem is, like, you throw the baby out with the bathwater, because on the business side, the same kind of thing. Like, people are like, those guys are flakes, right? And they can't get anything together. And, like, no way I'm gonna go like that. I don't want to be anything like that. They're just a bunch of crazy makers. But the problem is like each side has so much to learn from the other side. What a lot of things like process and discipline allow you to do as a creative person is they free you up from having to worry about stuff, or also they shield you from, like, external forces that come and totally disrupt whatever you're doing. And it's the tying together of, like, imagination and creativity and this kind of stuff with kind of like the discipline, what they call the discipline of execution, right? Where you get the repetitions in and you're doing this in a, in such a way that it's not like such a burden. And sufficient time over a long period of time, you'll just start to see things, and you'll start to be able to do things, and your brain will now be able to, like, understand how the game is played at a bigger level and in that field. And that's really what kind of it is about. The way that creative people think about stuff is something that people that are in, like, the more commercial side could really benefit a lot from. But the problem is there's just this cultural antipathy towards each other, and I don't know how you bridge that. Before we had a label deal, we would spend all the time practicing and writing songs, and then at some point that was a job, and that was the exact same motion, but then it became work, and that was very different. It's actually probably one of the things that was one of the biggest for me tragedies of that was, like, and still actually from 2009 up to now, I still haven't touched a musical instrument. I just haven't felt like it. The thing that's really interesting is, like, from having done the entrepreneurial side of things now, like there's so many, like, tricks and ways of thinking about things that, like, if I were to go back to do music, like, that, I was, like, totally do it all differently. And it's one of those things where I almost want to do it again just to see how different the result would be.
guys.
It's just fine.
Oh, jeez.
There are signs on it for a reason.
Push. Don't pull. Be gentle.
Be gentle.
Gentle.
Wait. Okay.